we will starting our REFrame. Okay. So what is the REFramework, right? What are the advantages, right? We will see it. So if you go to the new from template, right here, you can see Robotics Enterprise Framework. Okay. So if you click here, right, it will be open in a similar fashion. What process is there, right? So here also we have to give the name, description, right? So today we will do for UI demo. Okay. UI demo, REFramework, right? And click on the create. So normally when we are creating a process, right, it was creating a blank process, correct? But this is not the case with the framework. When we are creating the framework, it will have all the by default components. Okay. So what do you mean by default components, right? So the structure, right, of any project structure like initialization, get transaction data, process transaction, end state, right? So those things will be already there. Okay. So if you click on the main, okay. So you can see, right, initialization, get transaction data, process transaction, and end process are already there. Okay. So RE framework having four building blocks, right, and seven transition nodes. Okay, so these are the nodes like system exception, successful, no data, no transaction, success, business exception, and system exception. Okay, so first we'll talk about how it works. Okay, so first is initialization. So we already aware, right? Initialization. What we are doing one time thing, right? So those steps will come into the initialization. What the get transaction will do, it will take the data from the queue and it will store into the variable, right? Process transaction. The process transaction will do the repetitive task, right? And end process means at the end, right? One time task will be do here, right? Just you can see the description is also given to each and every building block. Okay. In addition to that, it having seven transition nodes. Okay. So what are those seven transition nodes and why it is there? We'll talk, right? So first will go to the initialization. Okay. So in initialization, right, it might happen like we are not able to initialize the application or we are getting any error. Okay. So your application is not opening due to server issue, network issue, right? It, it might happen we are not able to log in due to the invalid credentials, right? So those are possibilities are during the initialization, correct? So if we are having any issues like application is not opening or not launching or we are not able to log in due to invalid credentials, right? Then what will happen? We'll get a error here. Okay, so it will mark it as a error system exception and it will go to the end process. So why it will go to the end process? Because if your application is not launching, right, there is no point. Okay, there is no point to move to the get transaction data. Correct? Because even though if you take the get transaction data, right, where you will send, right, obviously will not have the next screen open into the process transaction. So the best way is to stop them, okay, and do all the necessary things, check, and then we can restart the pod. Right? But in other scenario, we can consider uh, initialization is happening properly. Okay, there is no issue. Then it will mark as a successful, or it will consider as a successful, and it will go to the get transaction. Okay. So what get transaction data will do? The get transaction data will fetch the data from the queue. Okay, and it will store into the variable. Right? It will fetch only the transaction atom having the status as a new. Right? We have discussed about. So there are two possibilities, right? In the queue, there might be the data is available or might be the case it is not available, right? So that's the reason here we have two nodes, no data and new transition. Okay. So if there is no data with the status as a new, right, then there is no point to move to the process transaction because it will give the error. So we have seen this scenario, right? It will give the error because there is no data available. So if there is no data available, it will go to the end process and it will stop the process. But if the data is available, it will go to the process transaction. Okay, so we can consider we are having the data available, okay, and it is into the process transaction. In the process transaction, the process will happen, right? Repetitive process. After that, there are three possibilities. Okay, success, business exception, and system exception. So first we'll talk about success. Okay, so we can consider yes, there is no error. We are able to process successfully, right? Then it will mark it as a success into the queue. Okay, it will mark automatically. Automatically means that mechanism is already built. Okay, even we don't need to use set transaction status and mention the fail, pass, right? This mechanism is already inbuilt. So it will mark it as a successful. Then it will go to the queue. It will try to get the data from the queue, next available data, right? So we can consider yes, we have the data. Then it will go to the process content. And now we will talk about the exception, right? So there are two exceptions, right? First one is business exception. Second one is a system exception. So what is the difference between business and system exception? Uh, we are getting any error, right? First of all, exception means error, right? So we'll talk about business exception. So what is business exception? We are getting any error, okay? We are getting any error due to invalid data from the application, okay? Suppose any field is accepting a numeric value and we are passing some alphabets or we are passing gen characters, blank value, then we are getting error, right? So such type of error is called as a business error. The error we are getting due to the invalid input, okay, to the application or to the system, it is called as a business. Okay, it means invalid business data. Okay, so any error we are getting due to the invalid input data or business data, it is called as a business error. Okay, so suppose uh, we are taking this UI demo, right, where we have to enter cache in, honest check, not honest, and we are entering alphabets and we are getting any error, right? So that error we will call it as a business error. Okay, but we have to define this is a business exception. Okay, we have to mention, right? If you are not going to mention, by default it will consider as a system exception. Okay, so how we have to define, we'll talk about it, but just want to give an idea what is business exception. Okay, so suppose we got the business exception, right? Then it will mark as a business exception. It will go to the get transaction data. It will pick up the next transaction item, right? Next available transaction item, and it will go to the process content. Now we have seen success, we have seen business exception. Now we'll talk about system exception. Okay. So suppose your bot is running continuously, right? It processing thousands of data, right? And it might happen your application got hacked. Okay, right? And if your application got hacked, right, what will happen? It will not respond, right? The bot will not able to perform any action. Or might be the case any network connectivity is there. So application is blank, right? Nothing will be there. Or any server issue, internet issue, for example, right? So we are getting any error from the application, okay? Due to any reason, apart from the invalid data, right? It is called as a system, okay? It is called as a system exception. It means data is incorrect. There is no issue with the data, right? Issue is with the application due to any reason, okay? So in that case, right, what will happen? It will mark as a system. And you can see system exception is going to the initial. Okay. Then why it is going to initialization? Because so far we have seen success, business exception, both are input, both they are going to the get transaction, right? But system exception is going to initialization. So why it is going to initialization? Because it will go to the initialization. It will kill all the applications because initialization we are defining those steps, right? Then it will kill all the application and it will try to reopen once again, okay? Or it will try to open the fresh instance. So it might happen due to this, the issue can be resolved. Okay, if there is any network fluctuation is there, or application is not responding, or it's an right. So if you try to reopen freshly, it might happen it will work, right? It might happen it will work, it might happen it won't work, right? So if it won't work, then it will mark as a system exception and the bot will stop, right? Because there is no point if your application is not opening, there is no point to continue the bot, right? But if the bot is able to launch the application successfully, it will mark as a successful. And what it will do, it will process the failed transaction. It will retry it. Why it will retry? Because there is no issue with your data. Okay, issue with the application. So that transaction will not get wasted, right? Or it will not get escaped, right? So to handle this, it will retry. It will try to retry, right? It will take the transaction atom from there, right? And it will process that transaction one more, right? So it might happen, it can be success, and it might happen, it can be failed again. Again, suppose if you got any network connectivity issue, or it might happen, there is a genuine issue also, huh? Right? That is the reason it will go and it will stop the process if there is a genuine issue, right? So in this way, this retry, as I said, right, we can define how many times the bot has to retry if any transaction fail. So we can define retry count 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, right? 1 to 50, right? 1 is a minimum, 50 is a maximum. But as per the industry best practices, either we can give retry count 1 or 2, right? Because if it we are trying and if it is failing 1 or 2 times, right? So it means there is something wrong, right? And we have to escape it and we have to go ahead, right, if applicable, right? So that's why this system exception is going to the initialization so that it can apply the retry mechanism on that particular transaction and accordingly it will change the state. Okay, and suppose if it retry 2 times and it is not working, right, and then it will go and it will try to pick up the next one. All those mechanism has already inbuilt here. We no need to take any extra effort to build this mechanism. Okay, clear. This is just high level working structure of RE framework. Now we will go and we'll implement it, right? But before that, whatever we have discussed, uh, like any question, any doubt, all good. Okay, now we'll go to the project. Right? Go to the project. Here we have project folder, right? So far we did not uh, modified anything into our project folder, right? And but now in terms of RE framework, we have to go into the data folder. Okay, data. Now I went into the data. So there are 3 folders and 1 file. Okay. So go to the if you go to the input, your input is saying? Input folder should be used to store all input files of the process. Okay. It means whatever the inputs required here, right, for this process. So those inputs we have to store in this particular folder. Okay. Similar way, right? Similar way we are having the output folder. So what output folder is saying, right? Output folder should be used to store the files resulted from that result from the process, such as report or status, right? So what it is saying, output file should be stored into the output, correct? Similar way we are having temporary folder. What temporary folder is saying, temporary folder should use to store the files while they are being processed. Once the processing part is done, the file should be removed from this folder. It means if something we want to store as a temporary thing, we have to store here and at the end of the process, we should clean it, right? And the next one is a config. So is anyone heard about config file or any idea? Because this is not only related to the RPA or UiPath. This is common across all the industry. So this is a config, right? So what is the config file, right? What is the purpose of config file, right? That we will talk about. So we have to update this config. So the config file is the file Okay, basically, and you can see this is the Excel file, and here we have three sheets: settings, constants, and assets. So first we'll talk about settings. In settings, we have three columns: name, value, and description. Okay, so first we'll talk about what is the config file. Okay, so in automation or during the automation, right, you are developing this process in the dev region. Okay, so whatever the input file you will store, right, or the name you will give, right, or the path you will give, it might change, right, when in the future or when you are giving to the client on client machine, it can be changed, right. Also, the queue name, for example, right, queue name can be changed. Then what will happen? If you are giving this project as it is to the business users, right, what will happen? Again, we have to go there, we have to update this code with their path, application name, queue name, right? Or sheet name, for example, if you are using Excel, right? So to avoid all those things, okay, suppose during your automation, right, if something is static, okay, and there is a possibility it can change in the future, those things we can take it from the con, okay, and we will use those reference into our automation. Okay, for example, you can see this is a name of the queue and this is a reference. Okay, so we will use this reference into our automation. So tomorrow, if the queue name is going to change, right, simply we can go here, right, we can update the queue name or whatever is there, and we can run the automation. So it will reflect automatically with the updated value. Why? Because we are calling this reference, we are not calling the real name. Okay. So this is the main purpose of your call. Because once you give to the business users, right, then maybe there are 100 places we have to change the queue name, file name, application name, sheet name, right? Then it's a tedious task. Okay. So to avoid all these conflicts, we are going to use the config. So this value is a real value. Okay. Name is a reference that we will use in automation, and description is like description about that particular parameter. Okay. So now we will build this config. Okay. But before that, we have to uh, go to the cloud and we have to get our queue name, right? And at the same time, whatever the input things are there, right? Those input things we have to store, right, into the input folder or output folder according. So we'll go here, right? This is my, okay. We are going to build for UiPath. Okay. So we'll go here, we'll put, okay. Also, I will mention this as an input file. Okay. Open this file, put the name as a in. Okay. Right. This is my input. Similar way, what I will do, I will take this file, I will put into the output folder. Okay. I will change the name as output. So output we will store here. Okay. And I will change the sheet name also. So in output folder, we just need this Excel file. We don't require the application, right? And we don't have anything related to the temporary thing. So we'll keep as it. Okay. So now we are ready to update our config file. So we need a or queue name. So we'll go, right. What is our queue name? UI demo, right? So I will give the UI demo queue here. Okay. Next one is asking orchestrator queue folder. So we have to give orchestrator queue folder. So please make sure do not give from the workspace, right? Give it from the new folder which we have created, right? Test automation, for example. Okay. And this is a business process. So why it is asking business process name? Because when your process will run, right, it will create some logs. Okay. And during that logs, we have to print the process name, right? Then maybe next question like, uh, what is the necessity, right, of giving this process name. So what happens? It will help to the run team or the support team, right, or the bot monitoring team, right, when they are monitoring the bots, because in the production, like hundreds or thousands of bots are running, right? So if they want to trace, or if any failure, right, so this process name will help them to understand, okay, on which process they are getting the error, right? So these parameters are already there, okay, by default will be there whenever you will create the config. Now what else is left? Input file path. And there is no sequence for this, right? We can give in any sequence, doesn't matter. Input file. So where is our input file here, right? So we have to take the path. How to take the path? Shift click, right click. Okay. Shift click, right click. You will get a copy as a path. If you are having Windows, if you are having Windows 11, right click will get copy as a path. Okay. Copy as a path and give it. So far we are giving the path like this, right? But when you are using the REFramework, right? Take the path from the data folder. Okay, take the data, take the path from the data. So you can see, right? Even though you are giving this as it is to anyone, right? It will work perfect. Then we have to give sheet name. Input sheet. What is our input sheet name? In. Okay, right? Now we have to give the application, right? Input app path. Okay, so where is our app? This one. So here, copy as a path, right? And give the path from the data folder. Do not give all this and do not give a double quotes. What else is left? Output sheet name, right? What is our output sheet name? Output, right? And output file. Output, output, right? So now we can go here, okay? Copy as and add of the data. Okay. So in this way, we are able to create our config. Fine. So any question, doubt so far? Good. Okay. So what you people can do? Go ahead, create the first your RE framework, right? Update the config file and then we'll go. Okay. So please proceed.